So I want you to imagine stepping into a small, completely pitch dark room. You are entirely anonymous.
Right.
You can't see the other people in the room, and, they can't see you.
And you know for a fact your identity is safe.
Exactly. You all know with absolute certainty that your identities will never be revealed. So what do you do?
Well, it's funny you ask that because in 1973, a psychologist named Kenneth Gergen actually ran this exact experiment.
Wait, really? He just put people in a dark room?
He did. He put groups of anonymous young strangers into a dark room just to see what would happen. And at first, they just talked.
Which makes sense.
Right. But soon, the conversation died down and the touching began.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating behavioral baseline. When you look at the results of that study, almost 90% of the participants ended up touching someone else on purpose.
90%, that's almost everyone.
Yep. More than half of them hugged. A third of them started kissing. I mean, one guy actually offered to pay the researcher to be let back into the room after the experiment officially ended.
That is wild.
It really is. And it proves a very powerful point, which is that when you completely strip away the fear of social judgment and consequence, human beings act on their foundational desires very, very quickly.
And that dark room is exactly what we're exploring in today's deep dives.
Yeah.
But we're looking at it on a massive planetary scale. We're looking at the internet.
The ultimate dark room.
Exactly. Specifically, we're diving into this incredible stack of research centered around the book A Billion Wicked Thoughts by Ogi Ogas and Saigadam.
Which is just a phenomenal piece of research.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore what the unfiltered, anonymized search data of a billion internet users reveals about the hidden architecture of human desire. We really want to know what people actually want when they think no one is watching.
Which is a genuinely revolutionary approach. Because historically, the science of sexology has been trapped in the light where everyone is watching.
Right, where people are self-conscious.
Exactly. Ever since Richard von Krafft-Ebing published Psychopathia Sexualis back in 1886, scientists have really struggled to study human desire accurately.
Because people lie.
People lie. Society pushes back. You have institutional taboos, funding cuts, and, a really heavy reliance on self-report surveys where people are naturally going to hide their strangest kinks.
Sure, you aren't going to put your deepest secrets on a survey for a researcher.
Exactly. Even modern psychology relies way too heavily on what we call weird subjects. Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic college students taking surveys for course credit.
Right, which isn't a great cross-section of humanity.
No, not at all. But digital footprints, search engine queries from Dogpile, leaked AOL search histories, and massive web traffic data. That data doesn't lie. It is the ultimate unobtrusive window into the raw human mind.
So by the end of this deep dive, you are going to understand the invisible biological software running your own desires. And perhaps more importantly, you'll finally understand why your partner's tastes might seem like they were beamed in from another galaxy.
It really does explain a lot of relationship mysteries.
It does. So let's start with the sheer volume of this data.
Yeah.
Because the researchers looked at roughly 55 million sexual searches on the Dogpile search engine alone.
Which is just a staggering amount of human wishing.
It really is. And it immediately brings to mind Rule 34. For anyone who doesn't know, Rule 34 is this famous internet adage that states, basically, if you can imagine it, there's porn of it.
Right, the idea of infinite variety.
Yeah, but the data tells a slightly different story, doesn't it?
It does. It paints a much more structured picture. While Rule 34 is technically true, like if you search hard enough, you can find erotic stories about lumpy potatoes or whatever highly specific scenario you can dream up. Human desire is actually incredibly clustered.
Clustered how?
Well, when you look at the macro data, you find that a massive 80% of all sexual searches can be categorized into just 20 specific interests.
Only 20.
Only 20. We are not a planet of infinite chaotic desires. We actually have a surprisingly small shared menu of fundamental interest.
Okay, let's unpack this because the book uses a brilliant analogy here, the taste menu.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Me too. So think about how we experience food. Our complex culinary loves, whether it's like a gourmet mushroom risotto or a late-night slice of pepperoni pizza, are all built on just 5 basic taste cues.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and savory.
Right.
The researchers argue that our complex sexual kinks work the exact same way. They are built on a finite set of innate evolutionary cues.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the most crucial point to take away from that is that these cues are hardwired into our biology. They are not culturally programmed.
Which is a huge distinction.
It's massive. And we can prove this by looking at instances where culture or society tried very hard to program someone's desires and completely failed. The tragic medical case of David Reimer is a prime example of this.
Right, the John Money case.
Exactly. After a botched circumcision as an infant, a famous sexologist named Dr. John Money convinced David's parents to raise him as a girl named Brenda.
So he raised him as a girl.
Yeah, and Dr. Money firmly believed that sexuality was entirely, dictated by social inputs, like a blank slate.
Wow.
He literally showed young Brenda pictures of adult men and said, "This is what grown-up girls like."
But I mean, his theory completely fell apart in practice, right?
It failed completely. Brenda tore off her dresses, refused to play with dolls, and when puberty hit, she felt absolutely zero attraction to boys.
Because the biology just overpowered the conditioning.
Precisely. The cultural conditioning couldn't override the biology because the hardwired software of the brain was already looking for different cues. Brenda eventually learned the truth, transitioned back to living as David, and married a woman.
That is incredibly sad, but so revealing about human nature.
It is. The underlying attraction to females was innate. And we see this on a broader societal level, too. Look at the Sambia tribe in Papua New Guinea.
Oh, this is a fascinating example.
It really is. As part of a highly ritualized initiation into manhood, prepubescent boys in this tribe are required to perform fellatio on older teenagers for years.
For years, so it's heavily ingrained in the culture.
Exactly. If culture dictated our foundational desires, you'd expect a society of predominantly homosexual adults coming out of that. But their rate of homosexuality is about 5%.
Which is the exact same as Western societies.
Exactly the same. They grow up, marry women, and their foundational desires remain totally unaffected by that intense cultural conditioning.
So if our underlying desires are this pre-installed software, let's look at how that software runs in men. Because the data shows that the male sexual brain is overwhelmingly, almost exclusively, visual.
Very much so.
The book compares the male desire software to the cartoon character Elmer Fudd hunting wabbits. It's solitary, it's easily triggered, it's highly visual, and it is constantly ready to fire.
It is the absolute definition of a visual hunting machine. When a man sees a visual cue that matches his pre-installed software, the subcortical regions of his brain light up instantly.
Which is like the amygdala and hypothalamus.
Exactly. These are the primitive reptilian parts of the brain that completely bypass conscious thought. He doesn't need a backstory. He doesn't need to know the person's personality. The visual is the trigger.
Right. The visual is all it takes.
Yeah, and men are so driven by this visual hunt that they will literally risk their livelihoods for it. The book highlights this massive scandal at the National Science Foundation, where dozens of high-level white-collar executives were caught spending thousands of work hours surfing visual porn on taxpayer-purchased computers.
Thousands of hours.
Yeah, one senior executive spent over 300 days just viewing images of women. Men dominate the traffic on visual tube sites like Pornhub because those sites are the ultimate wabbit hunting grounds.
So if Elmer Fudd is always hunting, what's the prey here? I assume it's not just general attractiveness. If this is hardwired evolutionary software, it has to be looking for specific survival markers, right?
That's spot on. Globally, the #1 search is youth. It dominates everywhere.
That makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
It does, but it's followed very closely by specific female anatomical features: breasts, butts, feet, and, surprisingly for some, penises.
Okay, we'll get to those last two in a second, but what's the biological driver for the first ones?
Well, there is a very clear evolutionary mechanism behind this. Features like breasts and large hips are storehouses for something called gynoid fat.
Gynoid fat, right?
And gynoid fat is a biological indicator of high estrogen levels, which historically signaled a woman's long-term health and childbearing viability.
Ah, so it's a fertility cue.
Exactly. The male brain evolved to find these specific visual markers utterly intoxicating because, 100,000 years ago, mating with a woman displaying those markers meant a statistically higher chance of passing on your genes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If men are evolutionarily wired to seek youth and fertility, these cues of long-term reproductive viability, how do we explain the massive, undeniably huge search volume for MILFs and GILFs?
It's a great question.
I mean, searches for grandmothers outrank searches for things like spanking. How does evolutionary software explain a 21-year-old college guy actively searching for a 50-year-old woman?
It seems like a total contradiction, doesn't it? But the answer lies in something evolutionary psychologists call mixed mating strategies.
Mixed mating strategies.
Yes. Yes, the male brain is wired to seek out youth for long-term reproduction. But the male brain is also highly opportunistic. It's flexible enough to pursue short-term liaisons as well.
Oh, I see.
Right, so for a short-term encounter, an older, more experienced woman who perhaps has already had children represents a consequence-free sexual opportunity.
No risk of an unwanted long-term commitment.
Exactly. In the data, fans of MILF erotica constantly emphasize that older women are confident, aggressive, and come with zero romantic complications. The Elmer-Fudd software is just executing a different strategy. A quick, low-risk hunt.
Okay, that makes sense for the age variations. But earlier you mentioned feet and penises as visual cues for men. Where do those come from? That doesn't seem tied to gynoid fat or reproductive viability.
No, it doesn't. Those tie into how the male brain actually imprints during development. The male brain has a critical period during adolescence where it is highly sensitive to sexual imprinting.
Like a window where the software is.
Exactly. And sometimes a completely random, non-evolutionary cue gets locked into the software during this window. We call these uncued interests.
Can you give an example of an uncued interest?
Yeah, the most unforgettable example in the research is Chaminda, a young boy from Sri Lanka. He kept a collection of ants as pets. Ants. And one day, while he was navigating his first experiences with masturbation, some of the ants accidentally crawled onto his lap.
Oh, wow. So the timing was just coincidental.
Perfectly coincidental. The tactile sensation combined with his physical climax created a permanent, hardwired neural link. He developed formicophilia, which is a lifelong sexual attraction to crawling insects.
That is wild. So the brain just links the two things permanently. Well, if the male brain is this hyper-reactive, simple machine where physical response and psychological response are perfectly synced, you'd think the whole human race would have mated itself into chaos.
You really would.
There has to be an evolutionary counterbalance.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the female brain, which operates entirely differently. And to understand how differently, we really have to talk about Meredith Chevers' groundbreaking study.
Oh, absolutely. This study is a cornerstone of modern sexology because it highlights the fundamental difference in how men and women process arousal.
Right, the plethysmograph study.
Yeah. Chivers brought women into a lab and attached a vaginal plethysmograph, which is a medical device that measures physical blood flow to the genitals. She then showed them a wide variety of erotic images.
Like what kind of images?
She showed them straight sex, lesbian sex, gay male sex, people just exercising.
Which is funny.
Right, and bizarrely, footage of bonobo monkeys copulating.
Which is just a wild variable to throw in there.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy part. For men, if you show them monkey porn, their bodies do absolutely nothing.
Right. Their brains just say, no, thank you.
Exactly. But for the women in the Chivers study, their bodies physically reacted. Their blood flow increased to almost everything on the screen, including the monkeys.
Yeah, their bodies responded physically across the board.
But when asked how they actually felt, they reported zero psychological arousal to the monkeys. So her body is physically reacting, the blood flow is there, but her mind is completely disengaged.
Which is so fascinating.
It's almost like a car engine revving, but the car isn't actually moving.
Right, the transmission is stuck in neutral.
Exactly, and it's waiting for the driver to consciously decide to shift gears. Why is there a firewall between a woman's body and her mind?
Well, this raises an important question, and that mind-body disconnect is actually a vital evolutionary defense. It's also something the pharmaceutical industry completely failed to understand.
Oh, wait, the peak Viagra thing.
Exactly. It is the exact reason why drug companies lost tens of millions of dollars trying to invent a pink Viagra. They approached female arousal like male arousal. They thought, Viagra works for men by dilating blood vessels. Let's just dilate blood vessels in women.
Because they thought physical equals mental.
Right. So they created drugs to increase vaginal blood flow, and it physically worked. But the women didn't feel any more aroused.
Because the transmission was still in neutral.
Exactly. Because female arousal requires psychological engagement, not just physical stimulation. A woman's body might react reflexively to sexual stimuli, which is actually an evolutionary mechanism to prevent tissue injury during unwanted sex. But her conscious mind remains totally unengaged.
So if the female mind acts as a firewall, what kind of data does it need to drop the firewall? What is it waiting for before it shifts that transmission out of neutral?
To understand that, we have to look back at the ancestral environment. Unlike men who historically faced very low risks from a short-term sexual encounter, ancestral women faced enormous life-altering risks.
Right, the stakes were incredibly high.
Huge pregnancy, the physical dangers of childbirth without modern medicine, years of vulnerable child-rearing, and the very real threat of being abandoned without resources. Because the stakes were so incredibly high, the female brain evolved to be the ultimate long-term investment planner.
And the authors call this neural software the Miss Marple Detective Agency,
Yes, Miss Markle.
the brilliant Agatha Christie detective who misses absolutely nothing.
Precisely. Before the female brain allows that transmission to shift into gear, before it allows true psychological arousal, Miss Marple dispatches 4 internal detectives to gather clues and assess the risk.
Okay, let's dig into what these detectives are actually looking for, because I imagine it's a lot more complex than just visual cues. Where does Miss Marple start?
She starts with the emotional detective. This detective is asking, does he care about me? Is he sincere?
Which requires looking at behavior over time.
Exactly. Women have demonstrably superior autobiographical memories and highly developed emotional processing centers in the brain. They are wired to deeply analyze a partner's character, looking for tiny inconsistencies in behavior that might reveal a lie.
And the evolutionary reason is simple, right? If a mate is lying about his devotion, he might abandon her when she is most vulnerable.
Exactly. It's a localized risk assessment.
That makes total sense. But it's not just about him, right? Because ancestral humans lived in these close-knit groups, so the environment matters too.
Which brings us to the social detective. This detective is asking, what do my friends think?
Outsourcing the investigation.
Exactly. Women are highly verbal and rely heavily on social networks to outsource clue gathering. If a potential mate is dangerous or unreliable, the social detective wants to hear about it from the whisper network before making a move.
Right, because mating with someone the tribe hated could lead to social ostracization.
Which was essentially a death sentence in ancestral times.
Right, and that concept of social standing bleeds right into the third check, the cultural detective.
It does. The cultural detective evaluates social acceptability. What is my status if I sleep with this person?
And just as a quick disclaimer, we're not taking any political sides here. We're just reporting on what the authors found in the data. But this explains a lot about erotica, right?
Yes, it beautifully explains why female-targeted erotica often features strong themes of politics, equality, and empowerment. It matters deeply to the female brain what a sexual encounter means within the broader culture, because historically, a woman's survival depended on her status within her community.
So we have emotional sincerity, social approval, and cultural status. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The physical detective. This detective evaluates the immediate environment. Is it safe right now?
Like, literally, is there a predator nearby?
Or even just, am I too stressed? If a woman is stressed, sick, or feels physically unsafe, Miss Marple shuts down the whole operation, her libido drops.
Which makes perfect evolutionary sense. You don't want to get pregnant during a famine or a war.
Right. And contrast that with men, where high-stress situations can actually heighten male desire. The male brain says, I might die tomorrow, I better pass on my genes today.
Wow, totally opposite reactions.
Exactly. The female brain says, the environment is unstable, absolutely do not get pregnant right now.
And we see the immense power of Miss Marple in that famous college campus study conducted by Elaine Hatfield and Russell Clark.
Oh, this study is legendary in psychology.
Right. They had attractive research assistants approach random students of the opposite sex on campus and simply ask, would you go to bed with me tonight?
And the results are just staggering. 75% of the men said yes to a complete stranger.
75%.
Yeah. And 0% of the women said yes. Not a single one.
So what does this all mean? It means Miss Marple refuses to take a case without enough background evidence. A stranger walking up to you on the quad provides 0 emotional data, 0 social data, and 0 cultural data.
Exactly.
The transmission stays locked in neutral because the detectives haven't had time to run their checks.
And that brings us to a fascinating divergence in the data. Because if men use visual tube sites like Pornhub to satisfy their simple Elmer Fudd software, where do women go?
Right, they need a different hunting ground.
Exactly. Women have built an entirely different empire to satisfy their Miss Marple software, a massive, predominantly text-based industry.
Romance novels and fan fiction. The financial data here is just mind-blowing. In 2008 alone, the romance publishing industry generated over $1.3 billion in sales.
Which outsold online porn.
It did. And women vastly prefer stories over visuals because narratives provide the exact psychological and contextual clues that Miss Marple craves.
Mm.
You can't see commitment or sincerity in a photograph of a naked body.
Right, you have to read a story to witness it unfold.
Exactly.
And just like male porn relies on a specific set of visual cues like youth and gynoid fat, romance novels rely on a specific set of psychological cues to build the ideal hero.
Right, to satisfy the detective agency.
Exactly. The hero must almost always be an alpha. He's a billionaire, a pirate, a vampire, a brilliant surgeon, or a Navy SEAL. He operates at the very top of the dominance hierarchy.
Which signals high status and competence.
Yes, and the absolute ability to protect a woman and her offspring.
Wait, but I have to push back here, because research always says women's #1 requested trait in a mate is kindness and understanding.
It does say that, yeah.
So if that's true, why are all these romance heroes arrogant billionaires and dangerous pirates instead of, like, nice guys? I mean, we're the billion-dollar romance franchises about the extremely polite substitute teacher.
This is the genius of the romance novel structure, actually, and it introduces a concept the authors call the coconut.
The coconut. Okay, unpack this for me.
So women don't just want a nice guy. A guy who's nice to everyone might just be weak or a pushover who can't defend his resources. What the female brain truly wants is a powerful, dangerous alpha who is hard and impenetrable on the outside to the rest of the world, like a coconut.
Okay.
But he possesses a sweet, tender, vulnerable interior that only the heroine is allowed to crack open and see.
So he can be a ruthless pirate to his crew, but he weeps when she gets a paper cut.
And that exclusivity is the key. If he is kind only to her, Miss Marple suddenly has the proof she needs. It demonstrates that the heroine has secured a uniquely powerful protector who is deeply emotionally invested in her and her alone.
Which drops the firewall.
Exactly. The ultimate climax of a romance novel isn't necessarily the sex scene. It's the moment the alpha breaks down and confesses his undying, exclusive devotion. That is the psychological cue that makes the female brain shift the transmission out of neutral.
It's absolutely fascinating to see how these billions of searches and billions of dollars spent all trace back to these deeply ingrained evolutionary directives. We've covered an incredible journey through this data today.
We really have.
From the millions of searches proving that our desires are highly clustered on a taste menu, to Elmer Fudd's solitary, highly visual hunt for biological markers of fertility, all the way to Miss Marple's complex, narrative-driven detective work, looking for the alpha coconut.
It is a lot to take in. And it's important to remember that while these statistics and massive data sets perfectly define the broad, overarching software of human desire, they're just averages.
Right, we aren't just statistics.
Exactly. They explain the broad strokes of evolutionary biology. But you are a wholly unique combination of experiences, memories, and precise imprinting. You might have your own version of the ants or your own specific twist on the alpha hero. The software is universal, but your specific hard drive is completely unique to you.
But it does leave you with a final, slightly unsettling thought to mull over. The next time you open an incognito browser window, or you pick up a steamy romance novel, or you just feel a sudden, inexplicable spark of attraction toward a stranger walking past you, ask yourself, are you actually making a conscious choice? Or are you just executing a line of prehistoric code written by the survival needs of your ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago? It turns out that giant pitch-dark room of the internet isn't just showing us what we want. It's showing us who we've always been.